You can see my cat in the background. There she goes. One of my favorite shows in the last decade, basically, has been The Boys on Amazon. I loved it from season one, and I've only grown to love it more as the seasons go by. I think, and I'm someone that really enjoys superhero media. I'm someone that has really enjoyed one half of the superhero media, the big licenses. The other half has been disappointing for the last couple of years, minus a couple really good ones here and there. But for some reason, Amazon got not one, but two really great, like, superhero properties under its belt that, at least with one of them, exceeds what it is adapting. I have no interest in reading the original source material for The Boys. First off, they've strayed very very different paths, different characters, and different situations. I've seen enough to know that I wouldn't really enjoy a whole lot of the comics. I've also seen enough just to know what's similar. I've watched the show versus the comics. So yeah, I'm missing some context, and there's some stuff I don't know about certain things coming up. But what I do know is I really enjoy the TV show, and season 4 just ended. I love talking about this shit. And this season of The Boys, I really enjoyed. So season 4 of The Boys, we are picking up after the events of Gen V, which, spoiler alert for that. Also, I really love Gen V, by the way. That was a really fun show, and I'm excited for season 2. I'm also curious to see how they handle the passing of one of the main leads, Chance Perdomo. He was in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. Really great there, and that's a shame, and they are also in just a weird pickle of a situation given where they left that show off. But season 4 picks up with that. There's now a virus that can kill soups. And the boys and Billy and Newman and everybody just wants to get their hand on this virus. And so throughout the season, that's kind of the main A plot, is trying to get from there to there. There are a lot of really great B plots in this season, and I think some of the best B plots. First off, we have A-Train's redemption arc this season, which is wild to me. I think he's slowly had some redeeming plot beats throughout the show. I mean, we have the point where he took down, what was his name, Blue Hawk. We have him saving Annie and Huey at various points, and they keep treating it like they're making good on these back and forths. But at the end of the day, he has no real reason to, except for outing Stormfront to them. So it was building up to this, but I did not expect them to spend as much time this season as they did, really digging into it. They start the season with him being in a situation where he is told he needs to kill 3 civilians in order to make the people that follow Starlight, seem worse. And from the jump this season, we're told, like, okay, he's definitely straying from the 7, from Homelander, and that's not surprising given where season 3 left off with Deep and Ashley and with A-Train. But he's definitely the most kind of betrayed the 7, technically. So this season really dug into that. I really dug it. They did some really fun stuff with him. I think his interactions with the boys, especially Mother's Milk, because they really don't have that many scenes together, they had some really fun stuff. I really appreciated him and Huey coming to terms with each other. And that was the big thing, is everybody, a lot of people watching the show this season thought that A-Train was dead. And like, the more they redeemed him and the more they kind of closed all these plot threads with him, you're like, oh, this is the language of television for, hey, this person's getting a lot of screen time, almost too much of it, because they're not going to be back next year. So that we've got that plot line going, which, by the way, I'm going to try to avoid spoilers for the season finale for a bit, and then I'll get into that a little bit later. So we've got that kind of B plot going on. We've got another B plot going on, kind of 2, going with Victoria and Huey, right? We've got her kind of seemingly showing some humanity, or fear at least. And then we've got Huey and Annie kind of in a weird place, because Annie is trying to figure out who Annie is without Starlight. Annie's trying to figure out who she is when all these people have put her on a pedestal. And then she's also trying to figure out who she is when one of the newer characters, Firecracker, decides to reveal medical history. And so she's in a really dark spot. All of the boys are really. Frenchie is not in half of the season, basically. He throws himself in jail, and that's, we don't see him for a couple of episodes. Um, Kimiko's dealing with her past still and grappling with that, which, there's a couple of moments in the show, especially in season 7, where you're like, oh shit, are we gonna lose her? Because she's such a great part of the show. She's such a great part of the cast. And then we've got Billy Butcher, who is getting increasingly sicker. We've got him ramping up to try to save Ryan from Homelander. And he is working with yet another agent, one that's not Grace Mallory, who is played by, God, I know, because he's Negan and he's Denny Duquette, and now his name, Jeffrey D. Morgan. Yeah. Yeah. Jeffrey D. Morgan is playing himself. He's playing a very similar version of what he's played in the last couple of years. And we get the reveal that Billy is seeing hallucinations of Becca, which we don't see a lot of that. I was kind of surprised that we did not see a lot of that throughout the season. We only saw it a couple times. And it's used to great effect to do the reveal that Kessler, the other person that he's been talking to, isn't real either. We find out that the real one died years ago, that Billy failed him in some way, shape, or form, and his subconscious, alongside the cancer he's dealing with, has taken it over and used it as the personification of, like, the devil and the angel on his shoulder kind of thing, which I really wish we had seen more of the interaction between Becca and Kessler. We don't really, and it's disappointing. Not that what we got was great. I'm just saying I would have loved to see more of that, and we might in the future. Who knows? Because there is one more season coming. We get more of the same with Mothers of Milk. I mean, we get to see him as leader and officially being the one to make decisions, but he's still kind of the straight man of the group, the grounded one. But we do see him really struggle, and I think this is the season he's been most actually prioritizing his family. I think since season 1, his family has felt like the motivation, but not something he ever saw himself getting back to. And I think with the introduction of her husband, all I know is he died at the beginning of the season. He was kind of an ass. With the introduction of him, it made more distance between him and his family. So we got more of that this season. We got to see some of the Gen V characters, which was really fun. We had a particularly dynamic episode with episode 6, Dirty Business, because not only are we kind of getting more details on Homelander, Sister Sage, Newman's plans, we're also dealing with what is arguably a point I hope they touch on next season, is the assault of Huey. I do think that the plot to the character of Tech Knight and it being this kind of sex crazed, nymphomaniac, weird power dynamics, all of that stuff, I think makes sense. The parallel there is funny. They just spent a lot of time on that particular situation with him and Ashley. So I'm curious to see, especially given what happens in episode 7 and 8, if we get into any of that. There's a chance they won't. There's a chance they might. I wouldn't guarantee it. I do think that we do at least get that moment of him breaking down at the end of that episode. And that's one of the things I know has been kind of contentious on, online spaces like TikTok, of people hammering in on that spot specifically, and compared to some other characters, situations like that. I do think that the Web Weaver introduction and kind of the parody of Peter Parker was really good. I think episode 5 was really great. We had Stan Edgar back. They're on a farm being chased by powered up goats. So I think that's all of the stuff kind of leading into. I think Sister Sage is great. She's got that Lex Luthor kind of my plans have plans and they have plans, and I've also got plans against those plans. Like, that intellect part worked so well and was such a great foil for Homelander this season, but also just her characterization in general was really fun. I also think her kind of manipulation of Deep was really funny because, again, he's the fish guy. It's one of the great jokes of the show is that Aquaman is just a guy that gets freaky with fish, and they really dug into that. So props to Chance Crawford for actually like committing to the bit. I saw an interview where he was like, that this is where I was like, this is the line. This is I've started to finally feel anxiety about it. And so I really love the idea that we get to see more of how the soups relax in unconventional ways, with how specifically Sister Sage is able to unwind and shut her brain off almost quite literally. Firecracker is terrifyingly too close to life with some of the rhetoric and her approach. Props to the actress there for just reminding me that there's certain awful things out there. So yeah, season 4 was great. I want to get into the finale and part of season 7. So we get the reveal, masterfully done, that Becca's a hallucination, also Kessler is. And in the 8th episode, we find Billy in the hospital. He's clearly, visibly really ill. He has rejected Kessler in the previous episode's offer of killing all soups, which includes some important characters. And so, assumedly, because of that, Kessler kind of taps out or knocks him out or something. He's clearly the personification of the cancer, which I think is an excellent way to approach it. You have Becca as his personification of his not his innocence, but his good side, his caring side, his loving side for, his brother, for Huey, for Becca, for Ryan even. And I think that's been another wonderful dynamic, is Ryan and Billy getting to know each other outside the framing of we're keeping you hidden from Homelander. I think Ryan having a lot more freedom to become his own character and not just a prop in the story was done really well. I would have liked to have seen a bit more of what happens after he, Homelander finds out that he's been hanging out with Billy this season. And I'm sure we'll be getting that next season when the actor looks like he's 23, because he probably will be. I think he's, in his late teens right now. But yeah, he comes to visit him in the hospital. Grace Mallory shows up, who we haven't seen all season. She's one of my favorite supporting characters on the show. And Billy has done, it's borderline. You could watch, the way you could read it is either it is manipulation at the best he's ever done it, or it is genuinely him caring and genuinely, the part of him that's Becca kind of showing himself more. And that may be part of it, but him finally kind of, he's slowly working towards, your father, Homelander, is a monster, but you've been so brainwashed and so convinced that otherwise, that you can't just pull him out of it. And Grace Mallory tries to do that, and in a very, shockingly to me, like, I gasped out loud, Ryan pushes the second person this season into a wall that he accidentally kills. But this time it's not just his stunt coordinator, who was played by the stunt coordinator on the show, which is really fun. I appreciate that kind of like, okay, well, let's bring the guy in that's been helping us do this for the last, couple of years. But he kills Grace, and it's such a, like, man, it's definitely, we're in the penultimate season. We're in the last episode. You got a lot of characters running around, and you only got one season left, and you got some pretty big battles coming up. You got to start letting a few heads roll, and in this case it makes sense. She wasn't here this season. She kind of completed a lot of the stuff. She was just there as kind of the government kind of point person, but since they were working with the president this year, it wasn't as necessary. So I mean, I'm very curious to see how that plays out, of him leaving. Is he gonna go back to Homelander? Is he gonna go to someone else? Is he gonna be by himself? um I do wish, because we got some of Kessler in the scene where he's hanging out, and I really wish we had Becca's hallucination there. I don't think at this point, clearly Billy hasn't completely given over to Kessler. He's really ill, so clearly he'd be hallucinating more. And I don't know if it was just scheduling or production, if it was because of the strikes, if it was because of whatever. We didn't get more Becca, and I think that would have been kind of the great scene for it. But I think if they decide to go a route of redeeming Billy, because Billy goes off the deep end this season, if they decide to redeem him next season, I think Becca's going to play a bigger part. So we might see her as more of a recurring hallucination if they still go that route. That then leads us into Billy kind of, when Ryan leaves without saying anything about killing Grace, he leaves and he lets Kessler take over, and he shows up at the boys' lair where they're making the virus, which I think is just the farm, right? It has to be. He goes there, and Huey's made a deal, and I think again the actress for Newman, really great, is pleading with Huey to take her and her daughter in and help them get away from Homelander and from the CIA, because the assassination attempt on the president, which we have to get into all that, which is crazy, right? Oh, geez. Ask for help, goes there, and to have, right as she shows up, right when you think, okay, we're really going to dig into this, he shows up and rips her to pieces. And it makes sense. One of the big two villains of the show needed to go. It makes sense that it was going to be her. I think because A-Train lived, which is not something we expected. I think because A-Train lived, they had to go that route narratively. It just makes sense. I'll be curious to see if A-Train's a big part of next season or if he's just kind of there towards the end. Who knows? But yeah, and that's the other weird part about this show, given recent news, which we are not getting into here at all. At all. This is not the place for that conversation. This is the place where we were talking about fictional made up stuff. But a shapeshifter has kidnapped Annie, which also one of the creepiest and best executions of shapeshifting in media, because more often than not, I think every version of shapeshifting we've seen in movies and in TV, it's always like the skin bubbles and boils and changes and suddenly you're the person, or it's a cloud of smoke, or it's something. And this is just someone sloughing off, flesh to reveal a new person underneath. And I really appreciate that they do dig in a little bit more, because I was talking to my partner about this after that episode where we finally see the shapeshifter, and I was like, God, that's gross, but there's so many implications about that and how it works. Is it like a lizard, like a chameleon, like where it's shedding its skin? How's that going to work? And we get to see that. It's so gross. But then also just seeing like that also just naturally happen. It's also really going to be interesting to see how Huey and Annie overcome that situation, given a couple of the things that happen. I think when she finds out that they slept together in the super suit, that's going to be frustrating. My jaw hit the floor in episode 8 when Annie clarifies that it's been 10 days since she was kidnapped and Butcher passed out in that bar. So like for 10 days, like that caught me way off guard. And so her reactions at first, I'm like, it was a shapeshifter. He's a human. The shapeshifter can take memories and personality traits, all this stuff. But then to have it be revealed that it has been 10 days, it makes absolute sense. So yeah, shapeshifter, we get some really great, it has to be an homage to Nightcrawler in X2, his scene where he's trying to go after the president. It's very similarly kind of shot, and I mean, it's the same concept as you've got a superpowered being in the place where the president is, trying to get him, running on the wall, jumping around, all that kind of stuff. So that was, if that wasn't an homage, it's impressive that it was so similar. I have to imagine it was. The show's full of them in the first place. And we really get to see Annie kind of determine that she's going to figure out who she is. I think a lot of the season has been Annie trying to figure out who she is, but almost believing that she can't, to now, after being confronted by just the purest of truths by this evil version of her that has all her memories, has all her thoughts, kind of thing. Um, Getting confronted by that, I think, really sets her up to be in an interesting place next season. So yeah, and then we get towards the end of the season, and we get the reveal that because Newman's been popped in half, literally, that the Speaker of the House will take over as president. He has put Homelander in charge of martial law for soups across the entire country, and that's setting us up to be in a similar place where the comic book ends, from my understanding of it. So clearly, they're going to be using some of those elements. Some elements they just can't do with the way they've set it up. I was surprised that we did not lose one of the boys. I for sure thought one this season. I thought if anybody it was going to be Frenchie. I think we kind of got out of all of the boys, his arc is the most complete. I think him addressing the fact that he killed his boyfriend's family when his boyfriend was a kid. I believe the name is Colin, which God, they had really great chemistry. Gate chemistry. Ew. Just watching that heartbreak and then him turn himself in, I could have seen a world where he didn't make it out of the season. I will be curious though. I was just thinking the other day because they have Soups show up to kidnap the humans specifically. Basically, the boys are on the run. They're splitting up to go their separate ways. Huey and Annie, Kimiko and Frenchie, and then Mother's Milk, assumedly to go catch up with his family. And they bring back some soups from before. We get the dollar store discount 11 from season 2 at the psychiatric facility, or the Soups psychiatric facility. We get Sausage. What was his name? I think it was Sausage. It was Love Sausage, who is the very well endowed Soup, who's looking very well recovered after getting burnt to a crisp during Herogasm. So I'm curious to see if we get any sort of follow up on that. And then we get the two villains from Gen V, which I think the implementation of them this season worked out well. I'm very excited for season 2 of that. We'll see how that goes. But I think their incorporation of the season made sense. It worked. But yeah, the humans get kidnapped. Kimiko and Starlight kind of book it. So I'm curious to see. A lot of what's going to happen next season is going to depend on what happens with season 2 of Gen V. I think it's likely that in the same way we got the virus reveal to to Billy at the end of season 1 of Gen V. Excuse me. I think it's likely that we will see the Kimiko and Starlight at the end of season 2 of Gen V, possibly recruiting them to help stop whatever is going to be going on at that point. I think next season's going to be really fast paced. I can't see them taking any time to slow down. They have too much to get through narratively. We've so many things to resolve relationship wise. And then, yeah, we just have a lot to confront with, which soups are going to be actual superheroes and good guys, which soups are going to be, aligned with Homelander, how much of this is going to be kind of an all out war. And then, yeah, who lives and who dies. I don't know. It's a very exciting show. I love it a lot. I've been really enjoying introducing my partner to it. They've loved it just as much. They have some really fun. They did a really fun drawing of Billy talking to Huey. Yeah. So let me know what you thought of season 4. I should note that, hey, I'm here to have a good time. I'm watching shows to have a good time. I assume you are too. It's one thing to discuss criticisms and plot beats and characters. If you are just now discovering that the show leaned into criticizing some more traditional values and you have issue with anything that I said at some point, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to fight. I'm not interested in fighting. I'm making a YouTube video about a TV show about superheroes, right? Like, come on. But if you had things you really enjoyed, let me know. I want to hear about that. If you have things that you're really excited for next season or for season 2 of Gen V, I'd love to hear that. Yeah, I don't know. I'd also love to hear feedback on this. I don't know. I'm going to try not to put too much concern into this so I can't disappoint myself. But if you enjoyed this format kind of thing, if you want to see more of this, please let me know. I will gladly ramble about media to my little heart's content. Yeah, I that's that. If you enjoy me, you can check me out on Mondays and Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern. I stream, horror games and co-op games, and we do some horror art with a couple of my friends, and they're all really funny people. I'm very fortunate to have them, and you should go check that out. There's also some videos that are that stuff up on the channel. Yeah, thank you for what this. I'm gonna end it here. It's so hard to end it when it's just you. Isn't that odd?